After 8 years and 70,000 miles, this car has quite the story. The chapters before I owned it weren't exactly gentle. The first time I ever started this engine, I was literally pulling a shredded belt out of the power steering pulley. We've been on a mission. Make this chassis as engaging as possible before we even touch the engine. But there is still a disconnect, a hesitation. When I turn the wheel, the car thinks about it before reacting. And for a build focused on pure driver connection, that's unacceptable. Today, we chase down the final millimeters of slop in the drivetrain. We're fixing the steering feel, locking down the rear end, and I'm gonna have to break out the torch to fix something most people overlook. Let's get to work. First up on the list, the steering. Before we bolt anything on, we have to address the lifeblood of the system. At 70,000 miles, this power steering fluid is probably original. Most people ignore this fluid until the pump starts whining. We aren't doing that. I'm cycling the old brown sludge out and refilling with fresh red ATF. Wheels up, lock to lock, and cycle the rack. This pushes the old fluid into the reservoir. Pump it out again, refill, repeat. With the lines clean, we're ready for hardware. This is a mod a lot of people overlook. We are swapping the flimsy OEM power steering brace for this thicker unit from SMY, and ditching the soft rubber rack bushings for solid Whiteline poly. The STI forums have a legendary step-by-step guide for this job. I linked it down below, but here's what you can expect. There's 10 bolts holding the cross-member support in place. These are on there pretty tight, so keep that in mind when you remove them. Remove the 4 bolts holding the driver's side bracket in place, and carefully slide it past your power steering lines. The passenger side bracket is easier, just 2 bolts and it's out. Now this next part is very important. Make sure your steering wheel is perfectly centered. Mark the spline coupling so you can get it back exactly where it was. Loosen the coupling and drop the rack. It's all finesse here, don't force anything. And here's the satisfying part. Using the included extraction cup will pull those old squishy bushings out of the steering rack. A wrench holds the nut, a socket ratchets the bolt, and there it is, factory bushings are out. Grease up your new bushings and install them by hand. The poly is thicker and denser, so have a little bit of patience. Passenger side bushing is simple, it just wraps around the rack. Now everything goes back together in reverse. Reinstall the passenger side bracket, then our new SMY bracket, tighten up our hardware, realign the splines on our coupling, and torque it down. And finally, we can torque to spec our steering rack and cross-member support bracket. Job complete, but how does it feel? Alright guys, it's expectation versus reality time. Now before I did this mod, I was expecting it to make the steering feel heavier, more muscular. But I have to say, it's actually lighter. And I don't mean lighter as in loose. I mean the resistance is gone. You can really tell that the steering rack is no longer fighting those old bushings. Steering is instantaneous. Basically, you think it and the car does it. And it's awesome. I grabbed this combo for that instant steering feedback. Use code SMYMike for 10% off. Check the pinned comment below for details. And while you're there, let me know if your steering feels as sloppy as mine did. So the steering is dialed, the front end is precise. Logically, touching the rack means it's time for an alignment. So I added another job to the list that I've been avoiding. The rear trailing arm bushings. They've been sitting in a box for months. Now I'd be lying to you guys if I said I wasn't a little bit intimidated by this job. But once I got started, there was no turning back. There's 2 bushings, one in the arm, which is annoying, and the other is in the knuckle, in a tight and awkward spot. After setting up the press, I was able to push out the inner sleeve. A sawzall cuts quickly through the rubber and partially into the outer sleeve. Then I switched to a hacksaw in order to continue that cut through the outer sleeve. The discipline here is everything. Cut deep enough to break the tension, but not so deep you scar the knuckle. Blast it with some heat, smack it with the air hammer, and finally it lets go. But the real show happened out here on the bench. It's the same battle, but way better angles to work with. Press out the inner sleeve, cut through the rubber, tickle the metal just enough, torch it nice and hot, and we're getting closer to winning the battle. This is the moment I teased at the start. Lighting it on fire is not required, but you gotta commit. Break out the air hammer, give it one clean shot or 100, and the arm is bare. If you look at the aftermath on the bench here, you can actually track the learning curve in real time. It's honestly a perfect timeline of me figuring this out. On the first one, I was being a little too polite. I was afraid of scoring the knuckle, so I didn't cut all the way through the sleeve. Because of that, the tension never fully released, and it put up a fight. But by the time I got to the fourth one, I realized I just needed to commit. Don't worry about the sleeve looking pretty. It's trash anyway. Now we can smooth out any burrs in the trailing arm and repeat the process for the knuckle. Then we press in the new bushings by hand and finally button up the rear suspension. The lessons learned here were worth the fight. And after a successful alignment, the car is dialed in. But there's one more drivetrain mod left to do. But first, I decided to run a little experiment. I wanted to try out these solid aluminum carrier bushings. My logic was simple. I wanted to remove the guesswork from when I installed the Perrin offset ones, which were a little tricky to line up. These solid ones just bolt right in. But the second I drove the car, the vibration was unbearable. The rear end NVH under acceleration and cornering was out of control. It just felt wrong. So I pulled them off and compared them. Look at this difference. The solid ones are significantly thicker. I'm not an engineer, but my gut says that this thickness may have pushed the drive shaft angle out of whack. I swapped the Perrin offset bushings back in, let the drive shaft settle naturally, and torqued them down. The result? The bad vibration vanished. Sometimes you actually need a little compliance. And now for the final boss, the solid shifter U-joint. If you look online, there are a few ways to do this, and honestly, they all suck. The popular method is knocking out these tiny roll pins inside the tunnel. I skipped that method and chose an even more insane method. I pulled the intercooler, the pitch stop, and literally dropped the transmission crossmember to lower the trans. It sounds extreme, and it is, but it gives you just enough room to work in a tight spot. The connecting bolt has this weird four-sided head, round on two sides and flat on the other two. You have to blindly hold a 14mm wrench on the flat side of the bolt while cracking the lower nut loose. To get the long bolt out, I had to pry the entire transmission away from the tunnel. It definitely is not fun, but getting that old U-joint out will complete my shifter overhaul. We replaced the plastic and rubber with solid metal. Reassembly is the reverse. Install our new U-joint, lift the transmission, bolt up our shift linkage, bolt up the crossmember, and reinstall our pitch stop and intercooler. Well now, if I have to use one word to sum up how the shifter feels, incredible. It feels like a gated manual now. Every gear has a clear path and dedicated slot. There is zero deviation. It is genuinely satisfying. But fixing one thing actually exposed another. You hear that clink? With each mod to tighten up the drivetrain, this sound got progressively worse. It seems to happen on weight transfer. For example, shifting from forward to reverse. I got to work checking over everything. Drive shaft play? 0. Exhaust hitting anything under the car? Nope. My theory was that stiffening up the mounts for the rear differential may have been transmitting too much internal gear lash noise. So I actually went backward. I removed the solid rear diff inserts to add some compliance back into the system, but the ghost remains. It's still there. I suspect it might be the center support bearing or maybe just rear diff backlash that was always there, covered up by the old rubber bushings. But hey, that's the reality of modifying cars. We built a car that feels so good, but we woke up a ghost in the drivetrain. Let me know down in the comments if you guys have any idea where this noise might be coming from. So, was it all worth it? 100%. The vague, floaty steering feel is gone. The driver connection to this car is maxed out. It's tight, it's angry, and honestly, it's given me the confidence to finally tackle the big stuff. Maintenance is done, brakes, tires, suspension, it's all dialed in, which means we're finally ready for the next phase of the build. But I know what you're thinking. You see an engine hoist and you think big turbo or built block. But if you've been following this build, you know I don't like to skip steps. We aren't adding a single horsepower until we fix the one weak link that can't handle what comes next. Well, the engine's gonna come out, but not for the reason you think. Hit subscribe to see if I could pull this off without any issues, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.